Welcome. So we are here today to take up the apprenticeship of sorrow and to explore our relationship with loss. And there are some losses in our life that we can actually be prepared for. We know they're coming. Ed and I are going through such a loss. We initiated this move to the mountains. We've always longed to live in the mountains. And yet, this involves letting go of a home we dearly love and a community we dearly love. And so there's loss, and we've been feeling that and anticipating that. And other loss comes suddenly, and it falls through our life, severing our life into a before and an after, and it changes us at depth. So today we're going to explore a new way to be in relationship with loss. And I want to share with you a little bit of a teaching from one of my beloved guides, John O'Donohue. In The Invisible Embrace, he speaks of the vital importance of our approach as we approach loss, as we approach grief. And he says, what you encounter, recognize, or discover depends to a large degree on the quality of your approach. Many of our ancient cultures practiced careful rituals of approach. An encounter of depth and spirit was preceded by careful preparation. Whatever we approach with reverence, great things decide to approach us. Our real life comes to the surface, and its light awakens the concealed beauty in things. When we walk on the earth with reverence, beauty will decide to trust us. The rushed heart and the arrogant mind lack the gentleness and the patience to enter that embrace. So, can we all agree that as part of being human, all of us will experience loss at some point or other in our lives? So it's really this quality that we're talking about is a quality of approach to being human. And when we have a loss, if we allow ourselves to actually feel it, we are refraining from participating in amnesia, in anesthesia, in numbness. The word aesthetic refers to our capacity to be moved by beauty. Anesthetic is a deadening, a numbing that does not allow us to see beauty or to fully experience beauty. Now, many of us, as we have approached our losses in the past, we may not have thought to bring in the concept of beauty. But the ancient alchemists understood that loss and pain and grief require warmth, require heat, require that we step toward instead of stepping away. And if we turn away from our grief goes cold. Our grief gets tamped down inside of us. Now we all know, I think, in our heads we know that feelings buried alive never die. And yet, It can be hard to fully feel the bigger losses, to allow them to integrate, to allow them to give us their gifts. If we turn away from our grief goes cold, and so do we. Anybody have an idea what the number one killer in the United States, the number one cause of death? Anyone have a, pardon?
Heart attack?
Yes, heart failure. We can't turn away from our losses without going cold, without having a physical consequence of that. And so what we're going to do today is to approach our losses with reverence. And I'm going to ask us to hold a wider space in your mind and your heart than you might have previously held for your losses. I'm going to ask you to invite beauty and warmth to join us in this conversation. Now, we have medicine in this room because every one of our losses, when integrated, result in what my indigenous teachers call our life medicine. Our life medicine, these are the gifts that we can give others. So what I'd like to do, because we have a room filled with people who have experienced loss. So what I'd like to do now is just to call out the different kinds of loss that you may have experienced or loss that you may know someone who's experienced. And we can start with what we consider from our vantage point as mortals who are designed, we are wired to stay alive. The body is wired to stay alive. What's the biggest loss that we would consider from this vantage point as mortals?
Death.
Death.
Non-being.
Non-being. But what are some of the other losses that we might experience as humans?
A job.
Loss of a job.
Family.
Loss of family.
Friendship.
Loss of a friendship.
Friends moving away.
Friends moving away.
A marriage.
Marriage.
Loss of a marriage.
Physical disability, limitation.
Physical disability, physical limitations, accidents, trauma. What else?
Loss of our minds.
Loss of the mental function, loss of the mental capacity. What else?
Loss of our pets.
Loss of our pets.
Faith.
Loss of our faith. Loss of the way we believed the world to be.
Natural disaster, loss of our home, our community.
Natural disaster causes immense loss. And as a country, as part of the globe, we have experienced the last 3 months since the solar eclipse have been filled with one natural disaster after another. So it may not be happening to you, but you can see it, you can feel it. We are a part of this global community that is really experiencing loss because of natural disasters at an accelerated pace. What else?
Loss of purpose, meaning.
Loss of purpose, loss of meaning.
Loss of truth.
Loss of truth. What we believe to be true may no longer be true for us. What else?
Loss of confidence.
Loss of confidence.
Self. Loss of self.
Loss of self. Who you believed and knew yourself to be. What else?
Joy.
Loss of joy.
Working.
Loss of being able to work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What else comes to mind? How many of us, we haven't gone through a loss maybe so intense, but we are in relationship with a child, a parent, a sibling, a spouse who goes through an incredible loss? Does that affect us in any way? Yeah, it does. So there are many ways that loss will find us. And there are many ways that we may greet our loss. In every indigenous culture that I have studied, loss was not considered an individual or even a family experience. When a loss happened to a person or to a family, that was considered a loss that was happening to the entire tribe, to the entire community. And that loss was not catalyzed and integrated individually or as a family group. That loss was brought into the safe circle of the tribe. Why? Why would that have been? Why would ancient cultures have created a ritual for every loss that happened to every individual in the tribe instead of just supporting the person one-on-one or the family group like we do now? Why would these losses have been brought into the container of the community?
Because it affects everyone. We're all connected by that energy. And the energy of one person and their loss will affect the whole community.
Right, so we're all connected. And in ancient times, that was better understood. Pre-literate cultures who were not left brain dominant were more in feel. They had the capacity to understand the interconnectedness, not just of themselves with the other humans, but with the animals that they lived with and around, and with the earth herself. So when a loss happened, it was integrated in the sacred container of the community. And there was no time frame for grief, like kind of there is now.
3 days back to work.
Yeah, 3 days and go back to work. Exactly.
You're fine.
You're fine. You know, and if it's a major loss, maybe you lost a child dies, or a spouse, maybe they expect you to be sad for
3 months.
maybe up to 3 months. Right. How many of us have had a major loss? We've had a child die, a parent die, a spouse. Okay, so a sibling. So most of us here. For me, the second year after my son died was the worse than the first, because I'd already endured the first birthday without him, the first Christmas without him, the first anniversary of his death. And the numbness, the shock had worn off. So grief has no timetable. The more deeply we love something, the more difficult it is to release that attachment, to let go. And the more we will grieve. So our grief is equal to our love. Okay, so what I'd like for us to do, because we don't have time for everyone to say their name and to share what it is they're holding. Oh, the other thing I wanted to share about, in addition to being interconnected in the community and the desire to have the grief integrated within the community, the ancient ones realized, they understood that when we fully integrate a loss, there's an alchemical process that takes place when it's well integrated, in which our losses become the medicine that we offer our tribe, the gifts that we give to our tribe. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I want us to get a little bit of an experience of coming into community, and what that would feel like to have your loss actually supported in your community. So I'd like everyone to stand up with me if that's possible. And those in the back, if you will come forward, and what we're going to do is we're going to hold hands in a circle. We need to make the circle a little rounder, so let's squeeze in on this side so they can squeeze in the back. Beautiful. Get a little closer to each other. Okay, sweet. Let's bring in a little bit. Here, let's go this way, around this way, so to give the people a little more room. Okay, now we have a pretty circle. Thank you, that makes me happy. All right. All right, so now if you would drop hands, and I'm going to call out some things. And if you have ever experienced, oh, first of all, before we do this, I want to point out that there's an altar in the center of our circle. And this altar has a burning candle on it. And this burning candle represents spirit. And underneath that candle is a little depiction of community, of tribe. And it's laying on an altar cloth from an Aborigine from Australia that is handcrafted, that depicts the path of life. And so what we're going to do, as I call out certain things, I'm going to ask each of us if it applies to you. If this loss applies to you, if it affected you in any way, I'm going to ask you to take a step forward. And we'll keep stepping forward. And let's just be mindful of needing to step around if you get to that. We need to step around the altar. And you may end up, at the end of this, just a couple of steps in, or you may end up on the opposite side of the circle. Okay? And that's okay. Wherever we end up, it'll be a mosh pit. It'll be great. And so you may be dancing around people that you pass. That will be okay. So I want you to think in terms of your childhood. And Wolf, if it's okay, you just sit, and as I say these, I'm going to look at you and you nod, and I'll step forward. So I'll be walking for you through the circle, okay? So I want you to think back to your childhood, and if you would, if you endured between the age of birth and 5 years old a major loss, whether it was the death of someone close in the family, or a move that was traumatic, or a loss of health, anyone in the family, I want you to take a step forward. Now I want you to think of your life from ages 5 to 10. And again, think about what you experienced ages 5 to 10. If there was any significant loss in the family, take a step forward. And now ages 10 to 15, these were the ages. Am I stepping forward for you? No, okay, not yet. Okay, so ages 10 to 15, we begin to be aware of our peers a little more than before. And so I want you to think about those peer relationships and those friendships. And if you suffered a major loss, ages 10 to 15, take a step forward. Okay? And now, ages 15 to 20. Think about what you were doing. Take a step forward. Okay. Okay. So now, I want you to think in terms of what was going on for you in early adulthood, ages 20 to 25. Take a step forward if you had a loss. 25 to 30. 35 to, sorry, was I 30? 30 to 35. 35 to 40. for some of you young people, you'll stay right where you are, but some of us will keep right on going. Okay. We were at 40, 45 to 40 to 45. 45 to 50. Fifty to 55. 55 to 60. $60 to $65. $65 to $70. Should we keep going? Yes? Okay.
Yes.
70 to 75. 75 to 80. Okay, look around. Look back to where you started. Those of you who are far away from where you started have medicine. You may not know it as medicine yet, but you have medicine. Let me just ask the question, is that part of us that might have existed before birth and might continue in some way to exist after we die, is that part of us marred or disfigured or wounded or altered in any way by our losses?
I think they're educated and, improved, made better.
You think they're informed and improved by them, like the eternal part of us.
Like a growth.
Like there's a growth. So how many of us have lost loved ones, like Heather described earlier in our prayer time, and after the transition, after that loved one moved into the next whatever and wherever, we have felt the presence or the love of our loved one? By a show of hands. So, when my mom was dying, and she had a 16-year dance with cancer, and so this was one of those losses we knew was coming. And as she was dying, maybe a few days before she transitioned, I asked her, I said, Mom, if you can, will you let me know that you're okay? After you die, will you come to me in some way and let me know that you're okay? And she said she would. And I just felt so relieved. And then I got to thinking about it, and I said, wait a minute. We need to agree on a plan, because how will I know it's you? I mean, do you want to bang the cupboard doors? Like, how are you going to let me know it's you? And she said, oh, honey, it's going to feel like it feels when I hug you. And it does. And it's that way with all 10 of my loved ones, including my son. So many of us have had that experience where someone that we love graduated into the next experience, and we felt their love. And for a while I wondered, is that really them? Or is it just the resonance of love when I think about the person that is present for me? And I've decided I have to cultivate the Buddhist state of not knowing and not needing to know. I don't know. But what I do know is this: I want to live my life in such a way that when it's my turn to graduate, as we all will, we know coming into life, this is a temporary experience. When it's my turn to go into the next dimension or wherever, that something of me, that love that I shared, is left in the hearts of the people. I recognize there is no greater calling to which I aspire than to be a reference point for love. So, as you stood there with your partner, were you aware of love between you, of respect between you? Even in just that short encounter with someone you likely didn't know, you could feel an exchange of respect and love and reverence. And what if we could hold that same kind of respect for our own losses? What if we could hold the idea in our minds that instead of being marred and wounded and disfigured, instead of our lives being ruined when a loss occurs, we are simply participating in the suffering of all humanity. So your loss, Mary, may be different than your loss, Sydney. But these two losses, these two sets of losses are simply how you are participating in the experience of being human. And when you then meet someone that you don't know who's had a similar loss, you may be able to offer support in a way that someone who had not gone through that loss could not offer. So perhaps it is that one of the medicines that is common to all of our losses is compassion for self and others. So let's take that into meditation.